Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. These are the words quoted by Helen Keller. Today, we, the students of Social Work Department, BCM College, are here to conduct Vykhari International Lecture Series. Today's webinar topic is Experiences in Participatory Approach for Community Development. The participatory approach permits development activities to be interlinked with the local people as part of the development process without any domination from outsiders or development experts or agencies. This approach is also an important method which allows local community and rural people to enable their own participation in the development process. Now, let's start this webinar session by invoking God's presence. I invite Finita Lucas for the prayer song.
കാണായ ലോകങ്ങൾ കാക്കുന്നു ദേവാ, കാരുണ്യ സിന്ധോ നമിക്കുന്നു ഞങ്ങൾ. കരളിന്റെ പൂക്കൾ നിൻ പാദതാരിൽ കാണിക്ക വെച്ചു നമിക്കുന്നു ഞങ്ങൾ. ലോകാസമസ്ത സുഖിനോ ഭവന്തു, ഈ മന്ത്രമീ ലോകമെങ്ങും മുഴങ്ങാൻ. വിജ്ഞാനദീപം നിറകതിൽ തൂകാൻ, നീരിന്റെ പാതേ തുറക്കേണി ദേവാ. കാണായ ലോകങ്ങൾ കാക്കുന്നു ദേവാ, കാരുണ്യ സിന്ധോ നമിക്കുന്നു ഞങ്ങൾ.
Thank you, Finita. Now, I would like to invite Dr. I. Verghese, head of the department, to deliver the welcome speech.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a fine day for Bishop Chottaparambil Memorial College, rather known as BCM College, Kottayam. We have started a lecture series, Vykhari, 3 years before, and have been actually concentrating mainly the audience near to our college and inside our college. But this year, the college management has taken a decision to expand Vykhari so that the knowledge reaches to many people, maybe across the state and across the country. Now, today's particular theme is a very valuable one especially for the social workers. The social work profession has been developing and growing for the many decades. And a participatory approach in the development has been taken and has been considered as one of the best or effective method for development, where we can get the participation, the ownership of the people, maybe mobilizing the resources and many other things. And this participatory approach has been practiced across the world by social workers. Especially this is applicable in the developing countries. And so we need to know how it is done, and it's also good to understand certain practices or certain, actual experiences of participatory approach. And today we have Ms. Kefilwe Dilek, from University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Actually, when I was searching for an experienced person on this particular topic, actually we have a close association with the University of Johannesburg, and Dr. Our good friend there, she has only mentioned the name of Ms. Kefilwe. She has done her PhD recently, and it's in the final stage. So in the beginning itself, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to Dr. Varoshni, who has helped us to get Ms. Kefilwe for this particular program. And she has been talking about our resource person since then. And a warm welcome to India and Kerala. We are located in the southern part of India, one of the most beautiful places in India to visit and to spend time. There are many people from your country who are studying here and, of course, visit here and spend good time. Even now also we have one student from your country doing field work here in our department. So with this, let me undertake the responsibility given to me. First of all, a warm welcome to Ms. Kefilwe and for taking this session, and thank you for accepting our invitation and joining BCM College Kottayam for this wonderful afternoon. We know that it's nearly morning there, and of course, we have set the timing as per your convenience also. Warm welcome to BCM College. And we have Dr. Steffi Thomas, our principal, in this crowd. He will not be speaking. Thank you, sir, for all the support and cooperation extended to our department. And the whole time is given to our resource person. And we have Father Philmon Kalatra again with us. And thank you, Father, for joining us. And we have heads of other departments also. And of course, all the students of social work department from other departments. A warm welcome to all of you. And we have people from other states also. Actually, Mr. Govilnath was the first person to join our meeting from Chennai. A warm welcome to all the people assembled here. And now over to you. Anju. Hello.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Next, I welcome our resource person, Mrs. Kefilwe Dilkhake. Ma'am, she is a social worker and a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg, and she holds bachelor and master's degrees in social work from the University of Witwatersrand and RA University, respectively, and is a PhD candidate at Witwatersrand University School of Governance. And she has worked at various NGOs such as the National Institute for Crime Prevention and Rehabilitation or Reintegration of Offenders, the Teddy Bear Clinic for Abused Children, and Community AIDS Response as Program Manager. And she's employed as a social worker in Johannesburg General Hospital, and she's worked at a lecturer at BITS University undergraduate and postgraduate program, as well as at the Northwest University Social Work Department. And currently she is working as a program and course coordinator and lecturer at the University of Johannesburg Social Work Department. Now, without any further delay, I invite you, ma'am, to address the gathering. Please, over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here. So can I share my slides? Okay, let me share my slides.
Yeah, you can share it.
Sure. Okay. Okay, let me see. Is it showing? Because it's not showing from my side. How do you share? Because we normally use Teams, and I just pressed share, but it doesn't show my slides.
Can you send your presentation to me now itself in that mail ID?
Okay, let me, must I email it immediately?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let me email it.
You may start now, please.
Yeah, so can we move into second
Sure.
slide? Second slide, yeah. Okay, yeah. So let me, my apology for that. Let me start. You would see on the screen that I think context is very important because community development is about context. So to present experiences of community participation and approaches, it will be also be helpful to understand in terms of how it happens within the South African context. So if you look at in South Africa, community development is a multidisciplinary, and that is somebody with a,
I request all of you, please keep your mics mute. Please keep your mic mute. Afshan, please.
Okay, thank you. So community development in South Africa is multidisciplinary, and that emanates from the history of colonization and the apartheid in South Africa. So it's practice in social work, it's practice in law, it's practice in teaching, as well as in nursing and other disciplines. And civil society in South Africa, the NGOs and so on, played a very key critical role in terms of community development. You would recall in terms of colonization that the key challenge within the South African context was the whole question of issues of social justice and issues of human rights. And in social work, we know that in social work in South Africa, community work is an additional, it's not on the scope of social work practice, but what is in the scope of social work practice in South Africa? It's community work, not community development. So social workers who were more activist, they played a key role in community development. Why they played a key role there? Because according to social workers in the South African context, felt that it will be easy to deal with social justice issues when you're focusing on community development. So therefore, in social work, they use community work and community development, but community development is a multidisciplinary at the moment in South Africa. So, but what you would see is that the golden thread that runs through community work and community development is the central role of community, participation. So community participation and participatory approaches have been hailed as a pinnacle for community, development. So currently in South Africa, you'd see that community development is professionalized to be an independent, profession, and that you would tell how social work is, that will pose a challenge in terms of social work because they are doing a dual mode of practice. They practice in community work and also practicing community development. But there are social workers who are more into clinical social work, and then there are social workers who are more into community development in our country. So after transformation in South Africa in 1994, they introduced in government what they call it Community Development Workers Program, and they also introduced community development practitioners. Some of the social workers who are inclined into community development, what they did is that they joined the government and work as a community, development practitioners because they feel that the challenging issues in terms of communities are best dealt with using community development rather than more into a clinical social work. So you would see that community development is very complex in terms of within the South African communities because with a professionalization, that will mean that it won't fall within the scope of social workers. Social workers who want to continue running community development will have to also do dual registration, because social work is legislated. So once community development is legislated, social workers will have to register for both professions to be able to practice community development. So you would see that there are many definitions as well in terms of community participation, and that have been advanced in terms of the literature of community development. So given the wide variety of meaning of community participation, there is, however, no universal agreement on what community participation entails, particularly if you look at the literature within the South African context. However, there are many ways of looking at community development participation or approaches. So there are two ways of looking at participation approaches. Firstly, either participation within the system maintaining and is associated with a weak participation. It equates participation with community involvement, community engagement, co-option, mobilization of people to participate in projects, or top-down decision-making projects. The other level of way of looking into participatory approach is the system transforming processes, which is associated with strong participation. It is equated with empowerment and also people-centered process. So community development is connected with the participation through empowerment, action, as well as social change. So if you look at the, if I look at my experiences in terms of community development in South Africa with a multidisciplinary approach, which happens in government and which happen in civil society, NGOs, where we have multidisciplinary practitioners, it raises a challenge. One of the key challenges that that if you employ it in government and implement government projects, so it's a planned project for the communities, which means that communities are co-opted to come and implement community development projects. So projects don't emanate from below, from the grassroots. And therefore, hence, it's very important for me to highlight these two key issues that I raised, that system maintaining as well as system transforming process in terms of forms of participatory community development. The system maintaining in community development, that's when we talk about top down. So it's linked to top-down community development processes. So you would see that community development practitioners and workers, so they do top-down community development projects, and that presents a challenge because of their tailor-made projects, and communities are mobilized and involved to implement government projects. But with a history of issues of social justice in South Africa, issues of unemployment and issues of poverty. So some people will argue that, yes, it's very important that government also play a key role in terms of provision of services and resources in terms of in people. Other people will argue that top-down community development programs encourages, dependency, encourages that communities are citizens. So it makes them not to be empowered. So those are the key challenges in terms of experiences of some of the community development in South Africa, particularly linked into issues of participation as well. So you would see that the analysis of community development, as I mentioned, is connected with participation through empowerment, action, and change. So the analysis of the concept of community is also very important because it will highlight some of the complex issues that should be anticipated when facilitating the process of community development. So can we move into the second slide? So you would see that community participation is open to political, social, economic influences, at the community level. So approaches to participation also differs in terms of one country to another, and also generally reflecting the socio-economic and political realities in terms of what is happening in our country. So hence I alluded earlier that the key dominant approaches in terms of community participation, you will see that whether be urban development, whether be rural development, there's a top-down approach and there's a bottom-up approach. In South Africa, the top-down with the programs, obviously you would see that this is what happens within in our context. So can we move into the second slide? So as I indicated, that the analysis of community also would tell you in terms of what is happening at the level of communities and how communities are defined within our South African also context. You would see that other complex issues are linked with the concept of community, which is some communities seen as a space or geographical, the functional community. And also we have also virtual communities, because you would see in the literature the definition of communities changing from geographical to community of interest, moving into virtual communities, and which is entirely lacking locality. This includes in terms of relationships that exist within the Facebook, WhatsApp, and so on. You would see that many communities in South Africa, so what they do, for an example, if they have to do neighborhood watch, they would use WhatsApp in terms of communicating, whether you know someone or you don't know someone, you are in that network, and then you get information and you get connected within that. So the concept of there's what we call it virtual community. So can we move into the next slide, please? So within the South African context, yes, community in South Africa, the local government, community demarcation include the ward systems that reflect space-based community or geographical area. The local municipalities consist of provinces, townships, villages, and towns, both rural and also in terms of urban development. You will see that in our policy, integrated development policy, it recognizes community as a key stakeholder in terms of development plans. So can we move the next one, please? Thank you. So the concept of community also presents complex challenges as well. And those challenges, those complexities in terms of conceptualizing community participation and community development may hamper participation. Like for an example, communities in South Africa, we have issues of class as well, and that can hamper participation. And we have issues in terms of different people with a different interest, or political differences, or cultural differences, or religious differences. And we have also many people in terms of with socio-economic challenges, and that hampers the whole question of participation in terms of community development. And you would tell that participation is very complex within the South African context, but that has to do in terms of history of community development in our country. So can we move to the second one, please? The other one, okay. So you would see that I've done the research studies in terms of professionalization of community development, looking at the complexities in South Africa. So there were three key issues that came out from that study. One is the whole question of community participation, and the second one is the multidisciplinary field of community participation, and also the level of partnership in terms of community development. So you would see that, so when you talk in partnership in community development, participation also with the professionalization of community development is also central, where communities also have to play a key critical role in terms of professionalization of community development, because when you develop a profession also, you have to engage communities. So if you look at history of professions, you will see that community sanctions play a critical role. Stakeholders play a key critical role. So my point that I would like to emphasize is that community participation can take different forms of level. It can be at the community level, individual level, group level, within communities, as well as the institutional level or organizational level as well. Okay, can we move to the second one, please? So therefore, community participation theoretical category as mentioned, because I was using grounded theory, came as one of the major issues. So in South Africa, majority of the participants indicated that there is a lack of community participation, and there is a need to look at self-directed communities, because people look at programs that comes from government and then they run with them. People get mobilized, and then they engage in government projects rather than projects that emanate in terms of communities. So the findings indicate that community participation is fundamental for communities to deliberate decisions on matters that affect them. You will see that if you look at literature of community participation, community needs to play a key role in matters that affect them. Okay, the second slide, the other one, please. So approaches to community participation. So there is a division between, in South Africa, the bottom-up and the top-down approaches, which dominates in the community development agenda. So in South Africa, what predominates, particularly after transformation, to look at history of community development, you would see that people were actively involved before 1994 with the transformation from apartheid government. But after apartheid government, so it has changed. Participation is more into at the institutional level with the practitioners. So in community development, they call it community development elitism, where practitioners come and impose projects, and community run with the projects that are from the practitioners or professionals. So reference to bottom-up participation at the level of communities are extensive in community development literature, both internationally and within the South African context. You will see that key to that in the approaches, those predominating approaches is the bottom-up and the top-down. However, within the South African literature, studies on community participation process, experiences and implications of the bottom-up approach and top-down approach in community development remained a challenge, particularly after 1994 within the South African government. Okay, so can you move to the next one? So transformation of social welfare in community in South Africa came with the introduction of the practitioners, which is social community development practitioners and community development and workers. So the government national planning and the program for community development operates from top down. So the practitioners are employed and they are told in terms of what do they need to implement in communities, and communities play and take on that to implement community development practitioners. But that someone can argue and say that maybe this is what is needed because of majority of people are unemployed with the economic challenges within the South African programs. So we need a very, a developmental state as well. Okay, so can you move to the next one, please? So the type of participation as indicated, okay? Before that one, 11, yeah. So the type of participation is co-option of people to programs, in my experience in terms of community development in this country, and actions not initiated by them. So it raises the question of active citizenship versus passive citizens, top-down community development, top-down bucket for service delivery, because we have programs for, they call it poverty alleviation programs. We have, they call them others, capacity building programs, and some will find that it's the assisting communities to form their own maybe organizations and so on, computer skills and all those things, and so that people can be able to be capacitated in terms of skills that they can use when they maybe get employment and so on. So it creates a dependency and disempowerment, and you'll find that it also in those programs that are initiated by government, people don't participate. And the reason is because people need employment. So someone might come with a in the community. Community would tell you that this is not what we wanted. You just came to tell us we need to plant trees. Yes, trees are very important, but we need, employment as well. So this highlights the division between the top-down and approach in community development in South Africa, and so on. Yeah, can you move to the next one, please? So you would see that with COVID in South Africa, it also exposed some of the key challenges, the structural injustices in South Africa, spatial planning as well, poverty, inequalities, unemployment, hunger, food insecurity, access in terms of also clean water, socio-economic challenges, and mostly these key issues, they were socially engineered, and they were ripping the fabric of safety nets of community, apart. So some of these key issues that showed during the period of COVID, you would see that they came as a result, and they are linked in terms of structural injustice of the apartheid South Africa. So can you move to the next one, please? So the system structurally led responses, as I mentioned, that the top-down approaches. So what the government has done is that the containment measures, including COVID, they had to give some social grants or social relief grants to people, and they also increased the child support care grant as well, and also the business relief were given in terms of the private sector, and also individual wage support in terms of the unemployment and insurance. It was a one way in terms of top-down approaches in terms of attending to issues of the economic crisis and issues of unemployment as a result of COVID as well. So can you move to the next one, please? So at the community-led responses, so the experience is that in some communities, particularly in a rural area, you will see that there was a lack of access to water. So what women did in terms of that, so they formed social support initiatives, so which they call it the Stockfell. That's where for construction of the boreholes. So what the women did is that they contributed money to each other every month. So everyone gets a 10 so that they can be able to get, they implement and they construct boreholes in their families so that they should be water in there. Can you move to the 14 before that one? Okay, so there were also some income generating projects which emanated from communities, and that included handmade soaps were made by communities, also including the sanitizers, masks also were produced by women and men in communities. So a mobilization strategy that were used in community as part of community participation in activities, in projects, to assist them in issues of unemployment. So they were coordinated via WhatsApp as well, including community development practitioners with the strict measures of social distances. And what communities did is that they used the WhatsApp in terms of communicating with each other. So that's how communities used to raise their concerns. And sometimes community water trucks and JoJo tanks so were established where communities sending messages to say we're running short of maybe water, particularly in a rural area. In an urban area, there is an issue in terms of there's no problem in terms of water and so on, unless the area is an informal settlement and there is no infrastructure, where you find that there was a vacant land in communities, and the communities took that land and they were, without the government, support, they just stayed in that land. And as a result, you find that they lack basic resources in that. But majority in our context is that there is no, majority of the communities in the rural areas, there are issues of basic services, water, lights, and electricity, etc. So the next slide, please. Okay, so you will see that in conclusion, in South Africa, in my experience, we still have a long way, to go with the community participation. The predominating approach in our context is what you call the top-down approaches. So it changed from after transformation of social welfare and social structures in a society, whereas before community were more actively involved, particularly in terms of political activism, addressing those social injustice. With transformation, the government changed and they developed, because there was a key issue of service gaps in terms of communities. That's why they introduced some practitioners and community development workers. That's why they introduced community development also practitioners. So, but if you look at community development workers, they are located within community and they're coming from the very same community where they are living. But community development practitioners are employed at the national level, so they only deliver programs within the communities. So the community development workers don't have programs, so they listen into matters that are raised by the communities, and then they take that into government. But community development practitioners come and with the services which are delivered in terms of communities. And social workers, there are some who do community development, and there are some who are not doing community development. And that becomes a key challenge because of the question of fragmentation, the question of silos approach, because practitioners end up working in isolation without working with each other. So participation also has to do in terms of multidisciplinary as well, interaction, which is also very key at the professional level as well. So although involvement and engagement of people are connected to participation, the question of control at the community level and the people-centered community development process is key in terms of community participation. So empowerment remains an essential instrument for transformation in terms of community development agenda in South Africa. So on that note, I would just like to end there and say thank you. So the rest, I think it's the references that I used before to prepare for the presentation. So this is, okay, yeah. Okay, I'm not sure. I think I've done with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Miss. Now, this is the time for question answer.
Okay.
Actually, it was nice hearing, because the participatory approach, what we see is it's different in different countries based on the political situation, the cultural situation of the country. Actually, before someone else asks, I have a few questions from your presentation. That is, one is you in between mentioned that the participation is sought through co-opting people. So if you're co-opting the people, I mean, is it at the discretion of the organizers, or will the community as a whole get an opportunity to participate in this when you co-opt somebody?
Okay. So when they co-opt communities, like they come with ready-made projects, like in government. So, and what they do is they involve communities. So you would see in the literature of community participation, they talk about community involvement or community engagement. So community involvement is some kind of system-led participation in terms of community development. So co-option, it's one way of not empowering people. You're just imposing, the projects from the resource level, where you requesting people to participate on tailor-made projects, on projects that are already made, and then you requesting people to join them and take action on things that they were never part and parcel of it.
That means it's a kind of a top-down approach.
Top-down, yes. Co-option is an example of a top-down approach. Like government programs, we have a lot of them. The interesting part in South Africa is that they're also professionalizing community development. And when they in community development literature, they talk about community development elitism. Elitism meaning only those who are qualified can implement community development. But currently, even people who don't have qualifications or volunteers can participate and do community development. Once they regulate community development in South Africa, it means that people will be restricted to implement community development, and community development practitioners employed by government will be delivering those programs which are made from top down to communities. And we find that these programs are done from one province to another, and communities are not the same, so they are different. It doesn't mean that if government has one program and it has to apply to the rest of the South Africans. So because I believe that communities are unique and their needs and challenges might be different depending on the context. So yes, it's a top-down approach.
Okay, I have one or two more questions I will ask you later.
Okay.
I see Professor Sanjay Bhatt from Delhi University also has joined, and along with many others. Sanjay Bhatt, sir, are you here?
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. I'm very well here, but I'm just as a participant. I was enjoying the discussion and trying to correlate it with the Indian situation. And I didn't find much difference into the participatory approaches here and in our in Johannesburg. And I had the opportunity to visit Johannesburg when the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development took place, and visited a few community development projects. I think that by virtue of being need driven and poverty driven, the project are bound to be participatory if they have to be successful. I see is a one condition that participants are willing, because they are getting the benefit out of it. So they do participate, and sometimes their participation is an excellent. And the essence of social work is lies in the participation, because the essence of democracy lies in the participation. And social work is a democratic subject, so by virtue of that, social worker has to be participated. There is no other escape, or there is no other way out. And that is why I believe that participative approaches are quite influential. Some part of her discussion I missed, so I do not know if I'm not in tune with her presentation. But I appreciate her presentation, and thank you, I, to giving me opportunity to speak. Though I just silently came, I do not know how could you identify. You have some radar, I believe, and you identify the people. Thank you very much, Professor I.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I concur with what you're saying in terms of projects which are need driven. So that to address issues of poverty. But currently with the professionalization of community development, you find that there is a tough issues, there is a tension in terms of professionals, because social workers feel their community development lies with them. Community development practitioners say, we are community development practitioners. Community development workers say as well, we are community development workers. So that's why in social work, I think the key challenge of social work also has to transform, because social work in South Africa, it's reflecting, I think it's modeling Britain, because there are social workers who argue that with the professionalization, if you take away community development in social work. So social work in South Africa will be rendering a first world model in a developing country. Hence, social work will not be relevant. So it's very important that also social workers play key role in terms of development and community development and participation. I definitely agree, in communities is also very key. And you will find that in communities, social workers are not visible, but community development workers are visible in communities. Hence, if they have to implement projects, if they themselves are not visible, communities will not be inclined in terms of participating in the projects or community work that they are also embarking on. I think hence in South Africa, I think the key challenge is the stakeholder, collaboration, because participation also is not, as mentioned, not only at the community level, it's also at the institutional level. That's where we see the silos approach, the fragmentation, and the TEF issues as well, which causes challenges, because if practitioners are fighting, the communities are inflamed. So it demands that participation and collaboration from community as well as in terms of the stakeholders in community development. Yeah.
Thank
Is there
you,
any
ma'am.
question?
Dear participants, you can clarify your doubts now and unmute your mics and ask questions, or you can put the questions in the chat box also.
I'm once again going to be a participant. You mentioned about one Stockwell system for, creating borers. What is the Stockwell system?
Or Stockwell system is more like a saving, where communities, they contribute a certain amount to each other. So let's say they are 10 and they say, let's pay 100 Rand every month. So each person every month contribute 100 Rand, and each, when they contribute that month, the whole amount goes to one person. The next month it goes to another person. It's more like a saving, community saving mechanism to assist each other if they also want to buy a certain thing that is important in either in their families and so on. So they help each other.
Okay. Actually, in
It's a
some
micro
parts,
saving.
a similar kind of system is followed in our state also. In some parts of our state, that's for marrying the girls during the marriages. A lot
Okay.
of people, yeah, they contribute, and of course, for every marriage, people contribute. So
Yeah,
that,
so they also do that in, say, for an example, if there's a burial, they call it burial systems, where they contribute money every month. If there's a funeral in a certain family, the rest of the community contribute money into that family and so on, so that they can be able to attend to their needs and challenges that they are facing. So those are the ones that mostly communities, they participate, 100% participation in those ones, like the Stokvel and also the funeral plans. Communities participate because they know that they will be assisted. They contribute money from their pockets, even if it's a little money, 100 rands or 200 rands a month. So that will help them. But with the tailor-made projects from top down, that's where it's a challenge, because communities feel that they need immediate employment, and with the economy and the challenges in the economy, and that can be problematic. So, but I do agree that in the meantime, I think that could be that those needs driven for families which are unemployed, I think it might be helpful. So that's why the debate between the top down and bottom up will remain in community development, because there are people who would need those resources from government because they are unemployed. There's no source of income, and then those with source of income obviously will never participate in those activities and so on. So the key issue is that even stakeholders' participation shouldn't be only from communities, it should be from the institutions, NGOs, government, civil society organizations, so that, or community-based organizations, if they have to sponsor as well, including the professionals where they can provide their skills, like social work as well. In terms of social work, it can be in community work, which is in South Africa is residually linked, and community development as well. So in South Africa, they call it dual mode of practice, which is community work and community development. And that also raises tension because of scope, the scope of social work. If you look at international social work, you would see that community, I'm not sure in terms of your, in India, but in South Africa, I know that community development doesn't fall within the scope of social work. So what falls within the social work is what they call it community work. Some social workers do community development within community work. So community work, they will argue that you can do it with a very small number of people. Like, for example, if there is an issue of alcohol abuse, and then you can form a small group and educate people around those aspects of alcohol abuse and so on. But the key challenge in terms of community development, they say, is a community development has to be developmental, and as a developmental has to address both the social and economic challenges, together. Yeah.
Sir, your mic is mute. Sir, your mic is mute.
I'm sorry. I have 2-3 questions. I will club together. And also, meanwhile, I welcome Professor Anita Rego from Hyderabad also. Yeah, my questions are actually in the participatory approach. For the need assessment, we use certain tools like certain techniques like participatory rural approach and all. So in your country, whether the people are getting an opportunity to participate in the need assessment process, that is my one question. And secondly, the participatory approach also ensures that the control be handed over to maybe the people up to an extent, not fully, but up to an extent. And also the concept of empowerment, for the stakeholders, that is also very important. So how these things are addressed there, or what is the status of these things in your country?
Yeah, so the first one, in terms of community profile, in terms of needs assessment, so in our country, they call it community profiling. There's a community profiling and there's a household profiling. So community profiling is geared towards challenges within a specific communities. So household profiling is geared in terms of families where they have psychosocial challenges or social challenges. And within household profiling, they say they identify an agent of change. Let's say everybody is not working in the community. They look at who can be a key person within the family that they can empower or capacitate, or that person must work with them so that to uplift in terms of that specific, families. And also what they do, community work and community development within our country. So they use a different approaches, asset-based approach as well. So I know our university as well emphasize a lot of asset-based approach, and the government uses sustainable livelihood also approach and so on. But yes, profiling that they also do has also challenges, because when practitioners go to communities and do profiling, you'll find that community will complain and say, you have been taking information from us for many years, so you don't actually coming back. So profiling in our country, I would say, has reached a crisis, because there is a duplication in terms of profiling. People don't see any benefits of being profiled because of There is no community-based planning. There is no social dialogues within, the communities. What they do is that they will come and hand out food parcels within the communities, and communities feel that they are not empowered. And the profiling is making them to be dependent. They are profiled for the sake of, yes, they identify you very poor and they issue food parcels to communities. I think that's a community challenge within the South African context, and it's a co-option, one kind of a co-option. They only get what the government has, and that doesn't empower communities and so on. But there are capacity building programs. Like, for example, they use cooperatives as well. So in the cooperatives, they will, for example, women, and they assist women to form the cooperatives. In those cooperatives, what those women do, they will sew school uniform. And those school uniform, they will sell them in various schools, but they get support from the government. So the challenges linked to school uniform project was that community development practitioners, some were social workers because they didn't have a business acumen, skills. So, and some of the cooperatives fail because of women who come and do sewing school uniform. Also, they didn't have a business skills. So that also presented a challenge. I do agree that it's very important that we also bring stakeholders to bring some skills as well, like social workers as well. So play a very key role in terms of capacity building, in terms of communities and so on, and empowerment, and assisting also with the psychosocial. That is very important. But the key has to be the community as a key stakeholder in that, and in collaborative partnership efforts. Yeah.
Ma'am, some of them put the questions in the chat box. Some
Okay,
of the participants put their questions.
Okay, what is the question? I can't see it. I was talking. I can't see the question from you. Must I check the...
Please read it. Some of you, please read it.
The first question is, during this COVID period, how can we enhance community participation for community development? By James Phillip. Ma'am, do you want to repeat it? During this COVID period, how can we enhance community participation for community development?
Yeah, so you would see that from one of my slides, I raised the issue of COVID-19 and community participation. So one way of enhancing that, because remember there are restrictions and there are issues of social distancing. COVID is a threat as well in terms of community development, because remember, community development is about collective efforts, and people are not allowed to come together, mostly in groups, are restricted by government and the laws. So one way of doing that is using what you call virtual communities. So it presented a challenge because this was never used before, but there is still a challenge because issues of access in terms of online, issues of access in terms of smartphones as well present a challenge to people who are very, very poor. So yes, people need to be supported in terms of resources. There is a need for resources. There is a need in terms of issues of connectivity as well. So issues of electricity, some people don't have Wi-Fi as well. So one way of doing that is that it's very important. What I know that community development practitioners during COVID, to make sure that they continue assisting people. So they also use telephone calls for especially families that don't have resources as well. So yes, virtual community has a role to also play in terms of that.
There is another question. As a social worker, what measures can be taken to provide equality to women, and how can mobilizing the income would help them get empowered with respect to community development? As a social worker, do you need to repeat it?
Yes, can you repeat it?
Yes,
something.
Yes, ma'am. As a social worker, what measures can be taken to provide equality to women, and how can mobilizing the income would help them get empowered with respect to community development?
Okay, so when it comes to community development and participation, you know that issues of social justice, issues of equity, issues of access are very key in terms of addressing the social economic issues in South Africa particularly, and issues also of social justice. And social justice is the key value of social work profession. I think what is very important, capacity building, because some women, they are raising children. So obviously if they are unemployed, they will never have access in terms of the resources and also taking care in terms of their families as well. Yes, capacity building, as mentioned, in terms of cooperatives. Some of these women are involved in the cooperative projects. They are trained in terms of income generating, projects, so that they can at least get something, so that they can take care of their families and so on. And also, what is very important is the education in social work, because if social workers are also not trained in terms of business acumen, so if they work with cooperatives, how will they be able to assist in terms of the families or women that they also work with, if they want to empower them with the resources? And another way is to source out other key stakeholders, because I don't believe that the problems in communities can only be resolved by social work profession alone. So community development, you have to bring other stakeholders to play a key role in a society to address the challenge and so on. So there is a role of other key stakeholders, including the private sector as well. It's very important in terms of assisting and empowering also women as well. They either with the employment opportunities, either in terms of capacity building skills, and also addressing issues of gender issues and so on as well. Because some of the women historically, you would see that they didn't have a lot of, they didn't go through maybe universities, they don't have education, and as a result, it becomes a challenge for them. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. And dear participants, there is an registration and feedback form is provided in the chat box. I request everyone to fill it, and we provide e-certificates for the participation.
Okay, so during COVID, I think participation was enhanced by what you call through virtual, through technology, where they phoned, either you use phone calls, either they use Teams. But from what we know, it was a very key challenge was the people having access to smartphones. I know that during COVID, what I did, even though I wasn't allowed to go in communities, so I used the online system at the church. So we used churches as well. So I used to work with people at church where we will take the names of people who are in need, either be older people and so on. And then we will take all their names and we will send them to maybe to the Department of Social Services. And in the Department of Social Services, they will intervene. Sometimes they intervene in terms of with those food parcel, because food security was the key issue in terms of COVID-19, particularly people with no income, source of income as well. And that issues of psychosocial, social workers also played a very key role in that. Yeah. So I think that COVID taught us also a lot that there is a need in terms of using technology within the community development to encourage participation. I also earlier mentioned that in some communities, like for an example, in cities where people were resourceful, it worked well for them because of they have all the Wi-Fi in their families. They're living in a big, in the big houses and big yards. It was easy for them to social distance, and so on. So for them, issue of access in terms of including their children who are attending universities, that they had all technological system they can have. It was not an issue, but the issue is at the grassroots level with people who are poor, the poor and the poorest. That's where the challenge is. So in terms of cities, majority, it was not a key challenge. The challenge is it was in communities and also people who are at the rural area and so on. That's why you would see that even the vaccination for rural areas in our country, what they did is that they didn't use like where you have to come vaccinate, come for the second round. So they used the Johnson once-off vaccination because of issues of access in terms of that specific rural area, because people sometimes have no money to travel as well in a remote area as well. Yeah, it's a very complex. So, yeah. Okay.
If anyone else has any question, any doubts, clarification, especially it's a wonderful opportunity to get to know the situation in South Africa, especially in terms of the participatory activities. I have one more question. And we have certain systems here, like where the community people are participating in the protective mechanisms for women and children, especially like we have certain things called as Jagrada Samadi in our language, and that's a committee consisting of the people in the community who will be acting as, or who will be vigilant towards the protection of the children and especially women. So that's again a participatory approach, supporting the government in the child protection and the protection of women. So is there anything, any activities similar to this one in your country?
Yeah. So what I've seen that happening mostly is in the suburbs, in cities with where communities serve as when they do neighborhood watch, in terms of to check as to whether there isn't anybody or a threat to other women, to communities. It's successful in a suburb area, but at the community level, communities rely on each other on addressing those key issues. But the government is not legalized, and so on. There's no mechanism, depending on if communities want to come together and watch that. Particularly, in South Africa, there was a looting, and so on, which was there on the internet as well, in terms of businesses and so on. In some communities, people were able to come together and stop, so that those key issues shouldn't even emerge as a challenge in terms of the business and so on. So it depends on I wouldn't say there is such a thing in government where it's legalized and so on. It depends on the community, if they want to use that mechanism, to assist each other and so on. But in a township, you find that sometimes they will employ certain people who will move around in the specific community, and they pay those people monthly and so on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other doubts? Okay. Now I invite.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Continue.
Uh, Ma'am, I just want to know about your country's woman empowerment. Can you explain it?
Okay, I missed that. What about the environment?
Like woman empowerment, woman
Women in
empowerment.
government.
Yeah, women,
okay.
women. Yeah.
Okay, so okay, I think so. Most people who are in government, I think you would see that those who are the activists. So it depends on which political organization that is in power. Yes, there are women in government in the South African context, but I wouldn't say it's 100%. It's one of the issues when you're dealing with the gender issues. That is one of the key when addressing issues of women opportunities, either be in government, either be in business, as well. I think it will remain, as one of the key issues in terms of the development agenda and addressing issues of women, either be abuse, either be access to opportunities and so on. So we have politicians who are ministers who are, yes, ministers in terms of government. There are very few women who own organizations and so on, but not a lot. It's the area that people who are in gender. Remember also in social work, we also specialize. So in gender, we do have some of the colleagues where gender is their area of interest. But yes, in community development, you will address gender issues and so on as well, play a very key role as well. It's one of the key important area that will remain in the development agenda. Women's rights, access as well to opportunities as well.
Yeah, okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So there is a colleague of mine who specializes in gender. So in future, if you want to, Shahana Rasul, I know when you come in our department and say gender, she's a specialist in that specific area, and she wrote a lot around gender issues as well. There's gender and development. So you have to, when you're talking development, you cannot ignore gender, but it's a specialization area there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be surely in touch with you. Any other questions, queries?
Sir, I have one question, sir.
Yeah, please, Gogulnath, please ask.
Yes, sir, 1 minute. Sir, my question is, there are a lot of people, tribal peoples are living in South Africa, no? So how they manage it for livelihood, earn money like that?
Okay. Okay, I miss you saying there are many people who in South Africa. I missed that. I missed the question.
No, ma'am. In South Africa, tribal peoples are living now.
Oh, are living South Africa.
Yes, yes.
I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, actually, that is a different area. Since ma'am is concentrating especially on the participatory approach for community development.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Actually, his question is like, is there any vocational training for tribal people for giving or making livelihood for the tribal people?
Okay.
That was the question.
Okay. Yes, there is. They do provide. So maybe I misunderstood their question. His question per se. So yes, that's why we have. They call them capacity building programs. So in capacity building programs, they have they capacitating the NGOs, assisting people to open up small businesses, and as well as cooperatives as indicated for women, and the government subsidize them, and they work as a group, and they run a business. They give them the skills so that they can also make a livelihood. So like a school uniform project, as mentioned from the cooperatives. So they're using them, and the money they get when they selling those uniforms, they use it to sustain themselves and so on. Yeah. Oh, I thought you were saying.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So I must also come to India and look at your community development, and so on. And I'll bring Verosh, will be coming with Verosh as well, Dr. Verosh.
Yeah,
when she comes
most
to
welcome.
India.
Most
Yes.
welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe in future, what we can do as well is looking at students in community development, and they do presentations. Students from your side do presentation, and students from our side do presentations, just to hear from students' perspectives, because lecturers have their perspective. Also, students have their perspectives as they, doing their internship in community development, and their challenges, for students, or their experiences as community development students in the field of community development, how they find as well participation or challenges and so on. It will be very interesting to hear it from students,
Yeah.
because they go to communities weekly and work with them as well. And what strategies they use to make sure that communities get involved and engaged.
And also sharing some of the existing systems, that itself will be a wonderful experience, and of course that will be useful for both the parties, both the countries as well.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Yeah. And is social work in India, because when I attended Asaswe, so there was a presentation that was made from India. So one of the key questions that was raised was that social work in India is not professionalized, it's not regulated. Is it true, or is it certain areas and so on?
Yeah. Actually, what you heard is correct. We do not have a council so far. We are still trying for the formation of a social work council at national level. So, except that, see, because of the absence of the council, we don't say this as a profession. Okay.
Yeah.
That professional status is not there. We call it as, semi-professional, or we always say that it's professional only, since because that is identified in 140 countries as profession. So we cannot say that social work is not a profession. So we are trying to influence the politicians, because these are the political will. So even there were attempts in the past also, 4 times, decades before. Now, last year we have again trying, for the last 1 year, that campaign is going on at national level by all the social work associations for the formation of a council.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're doing now is what community development in South Africa doing. So, but what they did is that in South Africa, we have they call it Council of Social Service Professions. So under that profession, you'll find social workers, you'll find child and youth care workers, you'll find community development workers, you'll find also community development practitioners. So when they professionalize, they will fall under one council. But within the council, each profession will have its own professional board as well. So what you're doing, that's what community development in South Africa it's heading to. So I think in South Africa, they in the final stage to finalize the community development as a profession. Because they also belong to a council, but it's not yet regulated. So they're finalizing regulation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other doubts? Okay. Now I invite Swati Krishnan for the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon to all. We have come to the end of this program, organized as a part of Vykhari International Lecture Series by the Department of Social Work in association with CAPS. First, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to Dr. Steffi Thomas, Principal, BCM College, and Father Philemon Kalatara, Bursar, in this occasion, even in their absence. Next, I would like to thank our HOD, Dr. Alf Verghese, for his valuable support. Next, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to Ms. Kefili Illati from University of Johannesburg for his valuable and inspiring words. Next, I would like to convey my gratitude to Mr. Jason MC, Faculty Coordinator, and I would like to thank the student coordinators Rubin and Ruhi. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the dear friends for being a part of this program. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you very much.
Swati. I remember everyone to fill the feedback form.
Yeah, thank you very much. All those who have joined from other places also. Thank you, Professor Sanjay Bhatt. Thank you, Professor Anita Rego. And there are, you can see many other faces. Jason Philip from CAPS. And there are many other faces. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, ma'am. So it was a very good sharing and wonderful interaction too. Surely will look forward to similar interactions, and as you suggested, we'll surely invite your gender specialist for a session, and we'll continue to have even student presentations also.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm
Okay.
also looking forward to collaborate with you in future, particularly on community development as well, and also at the level of students, either be social work or community development. In our department, we have two programs, the community development and we have a social work as well. So we collaborate at the research level where same students in the same class, different students in the same class, and so on. So we also maybe in future to collaborate at one level of specific module, either be community development, either be research, where students can share ideas across. I think that is a key, especially with technology, as well, online learning. I think it creates also opportunities for collaboration and partnership as well in terms of the education and to share experiences country to country as well.
Yeah, our we are already processing the MOU, and we are hoping that soon, very soon, it will be realized.
Okay.
Yeah, even we need not wait for that also. We can otherwise also connect.
Yes.
We'll
Yes.
be in
Thank
touch.
you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I request all of you to switch on your video.
Thank you, ma'am.
For a photograph. Please switch on your video.
Okay, it's time to wind up this session. I once again thank each and everyone gathered here. Thank you all.
All of you, please switch on the video.